Imagine paying like $40,000 completely out of pocket just to evacuate your family from a military base.
Oh, wow.
Right. And all of this is happening while literal flesh-eating flies are quietly infiltrating the U.S. food supply, and the stock market is just reeling from this massive new cyber attack.
It's a lot.
Welcome to August 2026.
Yeah.
When you handed us this stack of sources today for this deep dive, it honestly read less like the daily news and, I don't know, more like the plot of a geopolitical thriller, one that just keeps escalating.
It really is a staggering collection of events. When you look at it, you're seeing this simultaneous convergence of military standoffs, economic warfare, domestic political chaos, and, like you mentioned, agricultural crises.
Yeah.
And while they might look like entirely separate headlines if you just glance at them, they are so deeply interconnected.
Right. And so our mission for you today is to connect those dots. Because on the surface, you might wonder what a massive new financial war in the Middle East has to do with, say, a sudden trade feud with Canada, or how any of that somehow ends up affecting the beef you buy at the grocery store. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the price of your groceries right now, we actually have to start on the other side of the planet, over in the Persian Gulf.
Yeah, so the epicenter of your source stack is August 24th, 2026. This was the announcement of the new sanctions against Iran. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he used some pretty unprecedented language here. He literally called it an economic D-Day.
An economic D-Day. That is heavy.
Right. He described it as the single greatest financial offensive ever marshaled against an adversary. The administration's explicit goal here is to completely sever Iran's economic lifelines.
Just cut them off completely.
Totally. And to severely punish any global trade partners that do business with them. They're aiming for total, absolute global isolation.
Looking at the mechanics of this, a financial offensive of that scale sounds like, it's like trying to dam a massive raging river, right? Like, if you drop a giant concrete wall over a country's banking access, the water, which is the global trade, it doesn't just politely stop flowing.
No, of course not.
It aggressively finds a new destructive channel to burst through. Or it's like putting a financial dome over a country, but when you squeeze a balloon that hard, it usually pops somewhere else, right?
That is a perfect way to visualize it, because what's fascinating here is that the retaliation for this economic blockade, it bypassed the financial sector entirely. It spilled straight into physical and digital warfare.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so Iran immediately vowed to shut down all oil exports from the Gulf if the economic offensive continued. And they actually backed up that threat with kinetic action.
So real physical consequences.
Exactly. According to the assessment from retired General Barry McCaffrey in your sources, the U.S. Armed Forces have likely permanently lost access to 15 Persian Gulf bases.
Wait, 15?
15 bases, as a direct result of the escalating threat environment.
That isn't just like a minor tactical setback. That completely alters the entire security architecture of the region. If you lose that much forward operating infrastructure, you can't just hover in the ocean indefinitely. You have to scramble to replace it.
You do. And McCaffrey points out that the U.S. is now being forced to hastily negotiate new military access in places like Western Saudi Arabia, Israel, and even Southern Europe.
Just to maintain a baseline presence.
Exactly, just to stay in the game. And while the physical map is being redrawn under all this pressure, the digital map is already taking direct hits. Your sources include this terrifying report from The Telegraph regarding a cyber attack over in the UK.
Right, the power plant hack. Iranian hackers managed to shut down a British power plant for 4 straight days.
4 days, yeah.
Telegraph calls it the most successful cyber attack of its kind in the UK ever.
It's a textbook asymmetric response because, if you dam up a country's financial lifelines, they're going to flood the zone where your allies are most vulnerable.
Yeah, and shutting down a national grid for 4 days, that isn't just a digital glitch.
No, it requires breaching the operational technology layer of a critical facility. It's this massive demonstration of capability, proving the battlefield is just no longer confined to the Middle East.
Which honestly brings us to how these geopolitical shockwaves are devastating real people on the ground. Because the administration is pushing a narrative of strength, right? But this reporting you brought us from Stars and Stripes about the chaos in Bahrain, it paints a very different picture.
It really does.
There is this highly detailed account from an active-duty Navy spouse who was just trying to evacuate her family. And she fell into this massive bureaucratic gap in the military's emergency evacuation policies.
Yeah.
She had to pay nearly $40,000 out of pocket just to get her family to safety.
Just to understand the sheer scale of the chaos in Bahrain, we really have to look at the reporting highlighted by Anthony Scaramucci in the stack.
Okay.
Because this wasn't just some random administrative failure. Back in February, Iran aggressively targeted NSA Bahrain.
Wait, NSA Bahrain, that's the Fifth Fleet's main logistics hub, right?
Exactly, the main hub. So Iran hit it hard.
So the literal central nervous system for our Navy in the region was compromised.
Severely compromised. And as a result of that hit, the Navy had to abruptly shift its resupply operations for the USS Abraham Lincoln.
A carrier strike group.
Right. They had to move those operations away from Bahrain all the way to Diego Garcia.
Oh, wow. I'm like doing the math on ship speeds and distance in my head right now, and this seems like a catastrophic logistical failure.
That's bad.
Because Bahrain is roughly 800 miles from where the carrier operates. But Diego Garcia, that's 2,200 miles away.
Yep.
If a supply ship is traveling at, say, 15 knots, you're stretching a relatively quick resupply run into a massive multi-week round trip. I mean, how do you even feed 5,000 sailors, let alone supply aviation fuel and munitions, when the grocery ship literally takes weeks to arrive?
You mathematically can't sustain it. I mean, underway replenishment, or UNREP, that is the lifeblood of a carrier strike group. Scaramucci noted that the replenishment cycle dropped from a steady 3 days to these massive, unsustainable delays.
That's terrifying.
It is. You're burning fuel at a high rate, just keeping the carrier on station, and when your supply lines triple in length across a hostile ocean, your combat readiness just plummets.
Well, so if the military is struggling with logistical failures of that magnitude, the Pentagon's PR department must be in absolute crisis mode. How are they handling the PR for this?
Well, they are in crisis, and the domestic fallout is incredibly intense. According to Forbes and the Washington Post in your sources, the Pentagon essentially went to war with its own press.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they actually fired the leaders and the editor at Stars and Stripes, which is the military's own independent news organization. They cited insubordination.
Let me make sure I have this straight. They fired the editors for reporting on the abhorrent living conditions aboard the Abraham Lincoln.
That's the argument being made. And lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are pointing to this as a massive crisis of confidence in military transparency. Senator Richard Blumenthal reacted fiercely to this.
What did he say?
He called the political trashing of the publication a despicable disservice to veterans. He explicitly labeled it retribution for courageous reporting and went as far as calling it a literal cover-up. Now, just to be clear, we aren't taking sides on this, but we are tracking this fierce domestic fallout because it's tearing through Washington.
Right. It's just wild to see it play out. And, you know, the administration's strategy in the Gulf is clearly built around this weaponized economic isolation. But what's totally baffling, looking at your sources, is that they are applying that exact same isolationist strategy to our closest allies.
Right, which is a huge pivot.
Yeah. Which brings us to the northern border and the sudden 50% tariffs placed on goods imported from Canada. Here's where it gets really interesting, because Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor, and the Financial Times are literally describing Canada as being at war with the U.S. over trade.
Yeah. A sudden trade war with a nation's largest trading partner is a seismic economic event. I mean, the regional panic detailed in your sources, it isn't just D.C. political posturing. It is deeply rooted in how integrated these local economies are.
Can you break down the mechanics of that for a second?
Yeah.
Because when a politician says 50% tariff, a lot of people just assume, oh, a Canadian product gets a little more expensive at the register.
Right, right.
But it's vastly more destructive than that, isn't it?
Oh, it's exponentially more destructive, especially in manufacturing. Take the auto industry, for example.
Okay.
A single car part doesn't just get made in Toronto and shipped to Detroit. Like, a bumper might be stamped in Ontario, shipped to Michigan for painting, sent back to Ontario for chassis assembly, and finally finished in Ohio.
Oh, wow. So it's constantly crossing.
Exactly. That part might cross the border up to 6 times. So a 50% compounding tariff at each and every crossing. It mathematically destroys the profit margin before the car even reaches a dealership lot.
Which completely explains the sheer panic from the state governors we see in your sources. I mean, you have Governor Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania pointing out that Canada is his state's largest trading partner.
Yep.
You have Governor Abigail Spanberger in Virginia warning about the immediate crushing impacts of lost markets for farmers and foresters.
Right.
Then Representative Marcy Kaptur in Ohio is calling it a dire threat to the Great Lakes economy. And Representative Jamie Raskin is pointing out that Canadians are actually actively boycotting American products in retaliation.
Yeah, the friction is mathematical and the blowback is just instantaneous.
I have to push back on the core logic of these tariffs, though, just from reading the sources. If the stated goal is to protect American interests and businesses, aren't these lawmakers essentially arguing that we are just taxing ourselves into an inflation crisis?
Well, yes. That is the fundamental macroeconomic argument against broad, indiscriminate tariffs. And honestly, the sheer volume of chaotic, simultaneous policies is just overwhelming the political system right now. Lawmakers are pointing to this barrage of what they view as dangerous domestic distractions while these core economic fires burn.
The sources are full of lawmakers practically screaming to cut through the noise.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you have Senator Adam Schiff criticizing the administration for spending taxpayer money on an IndyCar race. He called it a self-aggrandizing spectacle meant to distract voters from the rising cost of gas.
Right, and Bernie Sanders is citing threats to, quote, bomb the shit out of Oman while simultaneously ignoring the forest fires that are currently burning down communities at home.
And then there is the ethical controversy raised by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. She cited news reports alleging that the president purchased up to $5 million in stock in major AI companies.
Specifically Amazon, Apple, and Nvidia, I think.
Exactly. And the purchase was made on the exact same day the White House unveiled its AI action plan, which, sought to loosen regulations on that very industry.
It is an overwhelming amount of friction. I mean, you have a kinetic war in the Middle East, global supply chains breaking down, an artificial trade war with Canada, and lawmakers fighting over IndyCar races and AI stock trades.
It's dizzying.
It is. But let's connect the macroeconomic paradox of this Canada trade war directly to the dinner table. Because the direct result of a self-imposed supply chain crisis is massive inflation at the grocery store.
Which brings us to the great beef contradiction.
The beef contradiction, yes.
Right, because to fix the inflation that the tariffs caused, the administration announced a plan to temporarily allow more foreign beef imports into the U.S., but without paying higher tariffs.
Right.
And this was specifically a workaround to ease the run-up in prices for American shoppers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the irony here is just the ultimate macroeconomic aha moment.
How so?
Well, the administration is aggressively taxing foreign goods under the guise of protecting American agriculture.
Right.
But because they ignored the underlying health of the U.S. cattle supply, their protectionist policy triggered a domestic inflation crisis. So, to stave off voter anger at the checkout counter, they had to break their own protectionist rules, exposing the domestic market to foreign beef just to suppress prices.
And the political blowback to this specific carve-out is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because lawmakers from across the spectrum are absolutely furious, but for entirely different mechanical reasons.
Right. The bipartisan anger is wild.
Yeah, you have Republican Representative Don Bacon pointing out the sheer illogic of the policy. He says you cannot do global tariffs, but exempt the one thing that actually helps American ranchers, while those same ranchers are still paying higher tariffs on all their farming equipment.
Makes sense.
He actually quoted Milton Friedman to argue that we just need to be honest that tariffs are simply a tax on consumers.
And then Republican Senator Tom Cotton approaches it from an industrial growth angle.
What's his take?
He argues the reason prices are high is simply because the U.S. cattle herd is just too small. So flooding the zone with cheap, below-market imported beef actively prevents American cattlemen from growing the domestic herd.
Which hurts the ranchers. Meanwhile, Democratic Representative Chris Deluzio argues that dumping subsidized foreign beef is a betrayal of Pennsylvania ranchers.
Yeah.
He points out that this move actually empowers the massive anti-competitive packer monopolies that already squeeze American farmers, which makes it mathematically harder to rebuild our own agricultural independence.
Amidst all this policy theory, honestly, the most pragmatic view comes from Representative Marlin Stutzman, a Republican from Indiana who is actually a cattleman himself.
His perspective is incredibly grounded. He essentially says, look, there is no substitute for American beef, and the method the administration used here is terrible.
Right.
But he accepts it as an immediate band-aid for struggling families at the grocery store. He stresses, though, that Congress is failing by not passing long-term mechanical fixes.
Like what?
Like country of origin labeling and low-interest USDA loans so farmers can actually afford to increase their herd sizes sustainably.
It perfectly highlights the tension between providing immediate consumer relief and ensuring long-term industrial health.
I completely agree. But Okay, I cannot let this segment pass without bringing up the absolute wildest, grossest detail from this entire stack of sources regarding this imported beef.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because while the administration is opening the floodgates for meat imports to lower prices, ABC News reported on one of the specific sources of this new beef, and it involves Mexico.
I know exactly the detail you mean, and it is not for the faint of heart.
No, it is not. ABC News reports that ranchers in northern Mexico are preparing to resume cattle exports to the U.S. as a year-long ban finally ends. And the reason that ban was in place to begin with, it was imposed because of an outbreak of the New World screwworm fly, which, for those who are mercifully unaware, is a flesh-eating parasite.
It's so gross.
A literal flesh-eating fly was infecting the cattle. How did we get here? We started this deep dive talking about a geopolitical financial D-Day in the Persian Gulf, and we have somehow arrived at flesh-eating flies in our burgers.
It is the ultimate butterfly effect, or, well, screwworm fly effect in this case.
Good one.
But seriously, when you drastically manipulate the massive levers of global trade and you weaponize tariffs and break supply chains, the unintended consequences don't just stay on a spreadsheet, they show up in the most visceral, unexpected ways right on your supermarket shelf.
Let's step back and look at the whole board here. We are forcing naval fleets to travel 2,200 extra miles for basic logistics.
Yep.
We are losing 15 military bases and scrambling to build new ones. We are starting artificial trade wars with our neighbors, shattering auto supply chains, and artificially managing agricultural crises. The obvious towering question is, who is paying for all this?
That question brings us to the fight over the national debt, which the sources show is absolutely reaching a boiling point. We have Republican Representative Greg Steube introducing the Government Bailout Prevention Act.
Okay, what's the angle there?
His core argument is that taxpayers in fiscally responsible states shouldn't be forced to hold the bag and bail out politicians who bankrupt their states through reckless spending.
Okay, and on the other side, Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is pushing back entirely on the narrative of who is responsible for the debt in the first place.
Right.
He's arguing that historically, Republican presidents, and Trump specifically, have added vastly more to the national debt than Democrats.
It is a bitter fight over who is ultimately accountable when the bill for this era of chaos finally comes due.
Which actually leads me to something I have to admit I was totally confused by. Amidst all these heavy economic, military, and geopolitical sources you provided today, there was this completely random orphaned note at the very bottom of the stack.
Oh.
It was just one sentence. It literally just said, "Who was Emperor Nero and what did he do?" I have to ask, why on earth is this in our deep dive today?
I was wondering if you were going to bring that up. I love that you found that note because it is actually the most perfect historical parallel for everything we've just discussed today.
Really? Yeah.
So Emperor Nero was the Roman ruler who famously, well, according to the legend, anyway, he fiddled while Rome burned.
Ah. Oh, wow. Okay, I see it now.
Right. It captures the deep underlying anxiety running through every single one of these sources. The feeling that while our leaders are locked in bitter partisan fights over, IndyCar races, AI stock portfolios, and pointing fingers over the national debt, the actual literal foundations of the system are catching fire.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Global trade is fracturing, military logistics are breaking down across hostile oceans, alliances are shattering, and the domestic agricultural system is in absolute crisis. The note is basically asking a fundamental question. Are our leaders just playing the fiddle while the system burns?
That is heavy, but it ties the underlying logic of all these events together perfectly. Thank you for bringing us such a wild, deeply interconnected stack of sources today.
Of course.
We've traced the ripples from the financial battlefields of the Persian Gulf, across a dangerously stretched logistical supply line in the ocean, up to the frozen trade war on the Canadian border, and finally down to the macroeconomic paradox at your local grocery store meat counter.
And as we close this analysis, there is one final provocative thought I want to leave you to mull over.
Let's hear it.
When a nation decides to weaponize its economy against its adversaries, like the financial D-Day we're seeing with Iran, and then simultaneously uses those exact same punitive economic weapons against its closest allies, like Canada,
Right.
What happens to the very concept of an alliance?
Well, yeah.
If friends and foes are ultimately subjected to the exact same economic tactics, will the U.S. eventually look around and find itself standing completely alone on the global stage?
A question that is going to linger long after this deep dive is over. Are we damming the river so aggressively that it floods our own house? Thank you for joining us today. Keep asking those hard questions, stay insanely curious, and we'll see you next time.